The heavy silver tray slipped from Sophie's hands and hit the marble floor with a loud bang. Hot tea splashed onto the white silk dress of the woman standing by the window. This was Sienna, the billionaire's fiancée. She didn't scream or move. She just turned her head and looked at Sophie with eyes as cold as ice. Every worker in the house knew the rule. Do not speak to her, and do not make a mistake. "Out," Sienna whispered. Her voice was like a sharp knife. Sophie scrambled to her knees, her heart beating fast. "I'm so sorry, Miss Sienna. I'll clean it." "I said out," Sienna yelled. Her face looked full of rage. Sophie ran toward the door, but she looked back for 1 second. The anger was gone. Instead, Sienna looked terrified as she stared at the door of Julian's office. Sophie spent her first week at the mansion feeling scared. The billionaire, Julian Vane, was a cold man who treated everyone like a machine. But Sienna was the one everyone feared. She was the one who fired people for small mistakes. But on Thursday night, things changed. Sophie had to bring coffee to Sienna's room. The door was open a little bit. Inside, Sienna was sitting at her mirror. She looked tired. Her shoulders were slumped. She was humming a sad song, a song Sophie's own mother used to sing. Sophie walked in quietly. "Your coffee, miss." Sienna jumped and looked surprised. "Oh, thank you, Sophie." Sophie froze. Sienna had never used her name before. Her voice sounded soft and kind now. "Are you okay, miss? You seem different," Sophie whispered. Sienna gave a small, sad smile. "I'm just tired. Julian expects me to be perfect. I feel like I'm losing myself." Sophie looked closely at Sienna's face. She saw a tiny scar above Sienna's left eyebrow. She had never noticed that scar before, even when she was cleaning up the tea. The next morning, the scary Sienna was back. Sophie watched as Julian and Sienna had breakfast. This version of Sienna was loud, aggressive, and spoke about complicated business deals. Sophie looked at her eyebrow. The skin was perfectly smooth. There was no scar. Sophie's heart sank. She realized the truth. There were two women. One was a sad, kind genius, and the other was a mean socialite. As Julian got up to leave, he grabbed Sienna's chin tightly. "Don't forget the party tonight," he whispered. "Be perfect. Both of you." Sophie was close enough to hear him. She felt a chill run down her spine. Julian wasn't just a rich man. He was a person who owned two different women. He was keeping a dark secret. And now Sophie knew it, too. If you are enjoying this mystery, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so you don't miss what happens next. Sophie couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Julian's voice saying, "Both of you." She realized that the Ice Queen everyone feared was a lie. Julian was using two different women to play one role. One handled the business, and the other handled the parties. But why? And where did he hide the one who wasn't on duty? The next day, Sophie decided to be brave. She began to watch the house like a hawk. She noticed that whenever Sienna changed personalities, she would spend an hour alone in the library. Sophie waited until Julian left for a meeting. She grabbed her cleaning supplies as a cover and slipped into the library. The room was silent and smelled of old paper. She pushed on the bookshelves, feeling for a switch or a gap. Suddenly, a section of the wall clicked and swung open. Behind it was a hidden hallway. Sophie's heart pounded in her ears as she walked down the dark path. At the end was a bedroom that looked like a high-end prison. It was filled with books and computers, but the windows were fake, just screens showing a digital garden. Sitting at a desk was the Sienna with the scar. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "Sophie, you shouldn't be here. If Julian finds you, he will destroy you." Sophie ran to her. "I know there are two of you. Who are you, really?" The woman began to cry. Her name was Elena. She was a math genius Julian had met years ago. He wanted her brain to build his company, but he hated her shy personality. So he found a look-alike, a failed actress named Clara, to be the public Sienna. Elena did the work in the dark, and Clara wore the diamonds in the light. "We are both his prisoners," Elena whispered. "Clara is mean because she is miserable. Julian tells her that if she stops acting, he will send her to jail for a crime she didn't commit. And me? He just keeps me locked in here to solve his problems." Sophie felt a wave of hot anger. She thought about how everyone in the city praised Julian for being a hero, while he was treating human beings like toys. "We have to get you out," Sophie said, grabbing Elena's hand. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots echoed in the hallway. Julian was back early. Elena pushed Sophie toward a small vent in the wall. "Hide! Now!" Sophie squeezed into the small, dark space just as Julian walked in. He didn't look like a charming billionaire anymore. He looked like a monster. He walked over to Elena and slammed a folder onto her desk. "The stocks are dropping. Fix it by morning, or I'll make sure Clara's accident happens tonight." He leaned down and hissed in her ear. "Remember, you are nothing without me. You are just a ghost in my house." Sophie watched through the vent, her eyes filling with tears. She saw Elena tremble as Julian walked out and locked the heavy door. Sophie realized she couldn't just run away. If she left now, Elena and Clara would die. She had to find a way to make the two women trust each other. She had to turn the Ice Queen and the Ghost into a team. Sophie waited for the silence to return, then crawled out of the vent. She looked at Elena and said, "He thinks you are alone. He's wrong. You have me, and soon you'll have Clara, too." This story is getting intense. Leave a comment below. Do you think Clara will help Sophie, or will she tell Julian everything to save herself? Sophie spent the next few hours working fast. She knew that Clara, the mean Sienna, would be back in the main part of the house soon to get ready for a big dinner. Sophie found Clara in the dressing room, surrounded by expensive jewelry and silk. Clara was throwing a fit, yelling at another maid about a pair of shoes. But Sophie saw the truth now. Clara wasn't angry. She was shaking with stress. "Everyone, leave the room," Sophie said firmly. The other maids looked shocked, but they hurried out. Clara turned on Sophie, her eyes red from crying. "How dare you tell my staff what to do? I'll have you fired by dinner." Sophie didn't move. She walked right up to Clara and looked her in the eye. "I know about Elena," Sophie said quietly. The room went silent. Clara's face went pale and she dropped a diamond necklace. It hit the floor with a sharp clink. Who is Elena?" Clara stammered, trying to lie. "She is the woman behind the wall," Sophie said. "The woman who does the work, while you wear the dresses. The woman Julian threatens to kill if you don't play your part." Clara collapsed into a chair and covered her face with her hands. She began to sob. "He told me I was the only one who knew. He said if I ever stopped being the Ice Queen, he would frame me for a robbery and send me away forever. I hate this life, Sophie. I hate being a monster to everyone." Sophie knelt beside her. "You don't have to be a monster anymore. Elena is scared of you, and you are scared of Julian. But if you two talk, you can beat him." Sophie took a huge risk. She led Clara through the hidden library door and into the secret room. When Elena saw Clara, she screamed and hid under the desk. She thought Clara was there to punish her for Julian. "Elena!" "Wait!" Sophie shouted. "She's a victim too." It took a long time, but finally, the two women stood face to face. It was like looking into a broken mirror. Elena saw the luxury she was missing, and Clara saw the freedom she had lost. They realized that Julian had been telling them lies about each other to keep them apart. He told Elena that Clara hated her, and he told Clara that Elena was a criminal. "We have to stop him tonight," Sophie said, her voice full of emotion. "The world thinks there is only one Sienna. Tonight, at the dinner, we show them the truth." The plan was dangerous. Elena had to come out of the shadows, and Clara had to stop acting. But as they talked, they heard the heavy sound of the library door opening. It was Julian's head of security, a man twice the size of Sophie. He had seen them on a hidden camera. "Mr. Vane was right," the guard growled, pulling out a radio. "The maid is a problem." He reached for Sophie, but Clara stood in front of her. For the first time, Clara didn't look like a fake queen. She looked like a real protector. "Don't touch her," Clara snapped. While the guard was distracted by Clara, Elena grabbed a heavy glass award from her desk and swung it with all her might. "We are almost at the end. Hit that like button if you want to see Julian Vane finally get what he deserves. Who do you think is the bravest character so far?" The glass award hit the guard's arm, making him drop his radio. Before he could react, Sophie and Clara pushed a heavy bookshelf in front of the secret door, locking him inside the hidden room. "We only have minutes," Sophie gasped. The three women ran through the mansion, their hearts pounding. They didn't head for the back door to escape. Instead, they ran toward the grand ballroom where the city's most powerful people were waiting for dinner. Julian was standing on the stage, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked perfect and untouchable. "I want to thank my beautiful fiancée, Sienna, for her brilliant mind and her grace," he told the cheering crowd. Suddenly, the doors at the back of the room swung open. Sophie walked in first, followed by Clara in her shimmering gown. The crowd started to clap, but then the room went silent. Right behind Clara walked Elena, wearing a simple gray sweatshirt, her face pale but her eyes determined. The guests gasped. They looked from Clara to Elena, then back again. They were identical. Even Julian dropped his glass, the sound of breaking crystal echoing in the silence. "What is this?" Julian hissed, his face turning a dark, ugly red. Sophie stepped forward and grabbed a microphone from a nearby table. "This is the truth," she shouted. "Julian Vane didn't find a wife. He built a prison. He used one woman for her brain and another for her face, and he threatened to kill them if they ever spoke up." Julian tried to laugh it off. "This is a joke. These women are crazy." But Elena held up a small black USB drive. "I have every email, every recorded threat, and every bit of stolen data from your private server, Julian," she said, her voice finally strong. "I did your work for 10 years. I know where all the bodies are buried." Julian lunged toward her, his face twisted with hate, but the guests moved back in horror. Before he could touch her, the police, who Sophie had called minutes earlier, burst through the doors. As the officers put Julian in handcuffs, the Ice Queen act finally died. Clara and Elena held onto each other, crying and laughing at the same time. They weren't just look-alikes anymore. They were sisters in spirit. Sophie stood back, watching the chaos. She had lost her job and her place to live, but for the first time in weeks, she could breathe. She had entered the house as a simple maid that everyone ignored, but she was the only one who had the courage to see the people behind the masks. Weeks later, the Vane Empire fell apart. Julian went to prison for fraud and kidnapping. Elena and Clara used the remaining legal funds to start a foundation for women who had been trapped in similar lives. And Sophie? She wasn't a maid anymore. She was the head of their security, making sure no one would ever be hidden behind a wall again.